My name is Jonathan. I'm married to Megan. When I was 8 years old, I decided to follow Jesus. What that looked like for me was growing up in a Christian home. My sister was born special needs. And so for me, I can't imagine having grown up in that situation without knowing who Christ was and that He creates with a purpose.
So I'm Megan, and I came to faith when I was 6 years old. My dad was a pastor for all of my growing up, and very telling of my personality. As a 6-year-old, I thought, well, I know that I believe all of this. I know this to be true, so I should probably get saved. I should probably ask Jesus to be my Savior. The next Sunday, I went down to the front at church and prayed with my dad to receive Christ, and then he baptized me a week later. I knew early on when I was a teenager, like, this is something that the Lord is going to do in my life, that adoption is something I'm going to pursue. So much so that there wasn't really a decision as much as there was just kind of a moving into it. To the extent that when we started dating, I said to Johnathan, you should probably know that I'm going to adopt kids someday. So if you're not interested in that, then you're probably not really interested in me.
And my response was just, okay. I make this claim that I'm pro-life. It was coming to the realization that, man, I had to be for something and not just against something. God's heart is for this.
Finished our paperwork, bound it all up in a huge envelope, and wrote a check for every penny we had in our savings account and sent it off to Gladney. And that covered about 25% of the cost. And we just said, okay, Lord, what are you gonna do now?
We had planned for that process to take about 6 months for us to come up with these funds for us to adopt. And 6 weeks later, the Lord had blessed above and beyond what we were even asking for.
With the exception of applying to Legacy 685. We knew that we were gonna do that. And we had seen them give large grants to families in front of the whole church, which we thought was amazing that we, when they did big extravagant things, we all got to celebrate together. When we got the call on a Thursday night and we were just sitting upstairs in our game room, that they were gonna fund a third of our adoption.
We fell on the floor, laugh crying. A wonderful evening to be able to talk to Legacy, to hear from them, to hear their encouragement and support and reminding us that they are for us. So we got fully funded. The Lord provided every penny that we needed. We found out we were matched on Monday. We went and had dinner with our birth mother and her mom and our caseworkers, and had the most fantastic time. We filmed a video in our car beforehand about how nervous we were and how we had no idea what to expect.
We had driven up to Dallas for that dinner, and we were flying high the whole way home, drove back to Houston Friday night late, and had been nervous all week, so barely eating and sleeping the whole week, and came home and fell into bed and put our phones on silent and woke up the next morning, and I had a voicemail from my mother-in-law, which seemed a little odd because she normally would just call him, and it just said, we need y'all to call us. And I just knew immediately what was going on, and I woke Johnathan up and said, honey, you need to call your parents.
My sister had passed away that morning. We get back in the car, we drive back up to Dallas. I spoke at my sister's service on that Tuesday. About 30 minutes after everybody left, Megan got a call from our caseworker that she was going to be born the following day. I can distinctly remember saying, I'm not ready for this. So we get back in the car and we drive back down here and we start getting the nursery ready. We get back in the car and we go back up.
Birth mothers can't sign their rights away for 48 hours after the birth. I was at the grocery store with my mom buying like the last minute things, the formula and all that kind of stuff. And my caseworker called and she said, this birth mother, she's just having a really hard day. And the nurses offered her the option to stay in the hospital another 24 hours and she decided that she wanted to do that. She's not saying she's going to change her mind, but we're also having a hard time getting in touch with her right now.
We made it through that night and we went to church the next morning with Megan's parents.
Sat out in the foyer next to the door, worried about cell reception. And I got a text from our caseworker that said, I'm going up, she's going to sign in a minute. Stand by, basically. And a few minutes later, she texted me and said, she signed, we're discharging now. And so we ran into the middle of my parents' church service and grabbed out my mom and her next door neighbors and said, we need to do placement at your house. And so we pulled them out of the service and we went downstairs into the basement because our caseworkers had our daughter, but wanted to wait for her birth mother to be there before we met her. Then she actually came with both of her parents and her sisters, and she got to put our daughter into my arms. I'm never gonna forget her leaving and knowing that this is the hardest thing you're ever gonna do, and I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life at the same time. 15 minutes later, we've signed a few papers and our caseworkers walk out the door and we're holding our daughter.
One of the most surreal things. So I thought it would take me some time to like bond or attach. And I fell in love with Evangeline the first time I laid eyes on her. I can't explain it. Just the first thing my dad said to me when I opened the door is, look at that smile. And that was just the joy of the Lord on my face from having met my daughter. We had chosen her name long before we ever knew she was a she. Evangeline Ruth. Her name means good news and friend. And we were praying for her that her name would be a friend of the gospel. And the timing of it all, the way God wrote the story, was so perfect that in the midst of what we were going through, we had a piece of good news. And the reminder that God is our companion and our friend.
His goodness is more than I can ever understand, that it doesn't change. The truth of that is so blindingly brilliant that we would go through all of the hard things 10 times over. I've never experienced God's goodness the way that I had when we held Evie for the first time. And on that day we looked at each other and said, so you want to start this again? Yeah. And we did a month later.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Waiting on number 2.